let's just dive in. So I like one of the ones he uses as kind of a showpiece, which is that in Acts chapter 20, I believe it is, we have the story of Paul speaking and going on late into the night. And a young man named Eutychus falls asleep in a
that's Derek.
Yes.
Right?
Okay,
well,
let's put up that stuff on Odyssey 10 to 12.
Okay, let me share my Odyssey 10 to 12, not Iliad, Mark. Odyssey. Here we go. Bear with me. Yes, it's playing at 1.5 times speed because we will not have time to go through all of it. So forgive me. Okay, Odyssey 10 through 12. Here we are, Dennis.
Okay, Derek, this is the passage in the Acts of the Apostles that Tim is identifying and that Jonathan is going to scoff. Now, I just want to work through these parallels with you, and I'll read the left-hand column. You read the one on the right,
yes,
and
sir.
I'll stop along the way to make a comment, and then I'll finish the final paragraph.
Yes,
so Odysseus and crew left Troy and sailed back to Achaia.
Paul and crew stopped at Troas, having left Achaia to sail back to Jerusalem.
Now, Troas is the equivalent of Troy. In fact, Julius Caesar wanted to move the capital of Rome to Troas in order to capture the Homeric fame of the Trojan War. And Virgil does so in literature. Now, you're going to see Tim think that I'm identifying Troy and Troas only because both begin with TR. That is so unfair and stupid. Troas is Troy. It originally was called Alexandria on the Troad. And then because there were so many different Alexandrias, because of Alexandria the Great, it simply became known as Troas. So that's the same city. Now, the voyage is narrated in the first person plural, we. But that's how it happens in the Odyssey too. Odysseus and his crew leave Troy, and Odysseus narrates it in the first person plural. We sailed here and sailed there. So that's the next item. There's a narration of the voyage in the first person plural.
Narration in first person plural in Acts.
After a sojourn, the crew and Odysseus ate a meal.
After a sojourn, the believers and Paul ate a meal.
Disaster came at night.
Disaster came at midnight.
The crew slept in Circe's darkened halls.
There were plenty of lamps in the upper room, meaning it was dark.
Elpenor fell into a sweet sleep.
Eutychus fell into a deep sleep.
The narrator switches to the third person now. There was one Elpenor, the youngest.
The narrator switches to third person, a certain young man named Eutychus.
The words for young are related in Greek, youngest and a young man. Elpenor fell from the roof.
Eutychus fell from the third story.
The same word is used for the fall. Associates fetched the body dead.
Oh, you skipped one. Elpenor's soul.
Elpenor's soul went to Hades.
Eutychus' soul remained in him.
And in both cases, the word is psyche, where we get the word psychology and so on. So it's the soul goes to Hades, or the soul remains in him. So associates fetched the body dead.
Associates took up the body alive.
Elpenor was not buried until dawn.
Eutychus was not raised alive until dawn.
Elpenor was buried at dawn. Eutychus returned to life at dawn. Homer called the young soldier unlucky, Adistratus, the victim of an evil doom of a demon. He had survived the Trojan War, Laestrygonians, Polyphemus, and Circe, only to stumble off the edge of a roof to his death because he was drunk. The name Eutychus, however, means lucky, from Ev, that is good, and Tiki, fortune. Unlucky Elpenor, and that's what he's called in Homer, unlucky Elpenor, veteran from Troy, fell to his death because of a drunken stupor. Lucky from Troas fell while listening to Paul preach. Odysseus was unaware of Elpenor's plight. Paul, however, knew of Eutychus's death and had confidence that his soul had not yet left him. Elpenor died and was buried at dawn. Eutychus died, but at dawn the believers took him up alive. Eutychus truly was lucky. Luke's synchresis or comparison included both invective, that is, an argument against what one finds in Homer, and an encomium by pitting Homer's Odysseus, who could only bury his fallen comrade, against life-giving Paul.
Paul's
Now,
better.
those parallels are amazing, and you can see. So here are the criteria. Would the Odyssey? I'm going to play Socrates. Derek,
can I close this? By the way,
yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm going to ask you a question, and then you answer it. Was the Odyssey available to Luke and his readers?
Of course.
Yeah, it was ubiquitous. Do we have examples of analogous imitations of this story?
Yes.
Yes, we have it in Virgil twice. Maecenas and Palinurus are both clearly imitations of this story. Do we have a density of parallels? Do they appear in the same sequence? And are they lexically similar?
Yeah.
They are. I mean, even lexically similar.
Oh, we're going to get into the lexical too in just a second, but I want you to finish your point because this is important.
Now, is it interpretable?
Yeah, of course.
Because
this isn't incoherent at all. This makes sense. Yeah.
Well, and the point is that when Paul's around, people are lucky because he can raise them from the dead.
Right.
And Elpenor is not. He's unfortunate. Elpenor, his whole soul has to stay in Hades. So people reading this story should see the comparison. Now, we don't know of ancient readers who recognize these similarities because we really have very little evidence that the early church was interested in the Acts of the Apostles, certainly not the way they were in the Gospels. So it doesn't satisfy all the criteria, but it certainly has lots of them. Now, when we go forward, we're going to see that Tim and Jonathan try to take this apart.
Okay.
And we'll see how forced their arguments are. By the way, they don't mention Eutychus as the name Lucky. They don't mention that. They don't mention the Virgil parallels, and they dismiss the differences between the two as simply non-parallels, when in fact they're strategic parallels.
Well, this is an important point because what happened when I launched our video yesterday is there was immediately a run to social media. Jonathan McClatchy actually wrote a post. I had to screenshot it because he actually changed it. My friend Stephen Nelson, who's also a huge Greek guy, like the guy's all over the Greek world. He's big on understanding the linguistics, the culture. I mean, this guy is he's a modern ancient in his thinking. He loves this stuff and he loves the Greek language. So Dennis McDonald has published a response video on MythVision channel with Derek Lambert on the recent criticisms of his Homeric mimesis theories regarding the Gospels and Acts by Dr. Tim McGrew, Dr. Stephen Boyce, Eric Manning, and myself. A very disappointing showing from McDonald. He spends the majority of time engaging in behavior unbefitting of a scholar. By the way, if you watch their stream, the link is in the description. Talk about unbefitting behavior. Their supposed PhDs on this stream, they're jabbing, they're doing all sorts of stuff, but when Dennis did it back, they don't like it, so now that's unbefitting. Patronizing us, calling us anti-intellectual, but then he added intellectuals. He doesn't mention that here. Psychoanalyzing us, saying he feels sorry for us, and I understand why, and engaging in the atheist equivalent of y'all just want to sin. Much of the rest of the video simply stresses that the early Christians were influenced by Hellenistic thought, which is quite clear from reading the early church fathers. The point in contention, though, is not whether the ancient Christians were influenced by Hellenistic thought. They undoubtedly were, but whether MacDonald has successfully demonstrated intentional imitation in the Gospels and Acts of Homer's epics. He criticizes me at one point for not mentioning in my discussion of his Elpenor-Eutychus parallel that the name Eutychus means lucky, which is supposedly the precise opposite of what is said of Elpenor. MacDonald is correct about the meaning of Eutychus's name. However, if one were to give a meaning to the name Elpenor, look at this. Pay attention, everyone, and I can't wait for Dennis to respond to this. I would probably be inclined to go for something like hopeful bird, from the Greek words hopeful and bird. I do not know these Greek words, but this is very speculative. As for what is said specifically of Elpenor in the Odyssey, the closest thing is the word. What is that word, Dennis?
Distanos.
Which means wretched, which is a far cry from unfortunate. MacDonald also complains that we think that the historical reportage model wins by default if his mimesis theories are incorrect. But this is false. We offered a specific arguments for the historical reportage model. What an embarrassment. Stephen Boise liked it. Okay, so anyway, I'd like to get your thoughts specifically in this section here on him trying to understand the word Elpenor and its meaning. And what you mean?
The first thing is, yes, Eutychus means lucky. He agrees with that. Well, in what way would our reader say he's lucky? He's lucky because he comes back to life. Now, Elpenor does not come from Ornos as the end of it. It does begin with Elp, which Jonathan is right. It means hope or hopeful. But the ending of it doesn't come from Ornis, it comes from Aenor. And the Odyssey talks about Odysseus's faithful crew as Agenor, as truly manly. And what happens with Elpenor is he wants to be a man. He wants to be a hero, but he's not. So what is he? He's an oarsman. He was a grunt in the Trojan War. He was a young man. Now he's pulling an oar. And so when he dies, he wants an oar placed on his tomb, which is instead of a weapon, as you would for. So it comes from wants to be a man. He wants to be courageous. And of course, Eutychus is not very courageous. He can't even stay awake that time, for that long. Now, Dustanos can be translated as wretched. What is meant by wretched? It means that he's unfortunate. It's said at least twice in the Odyssey, and people who rewrote the stories of Elpenor actually emphasize this word, that how unfortunate he was that he survived the war and he gets drunk and he dies. So that philology, Jonathan, is just weak. And take a look at some commentaries on this passage and you'll see that I'm right about it.
So to make it into simple terms, since we had the scholarly assessment, that is, this guy was in war. He wasn't really heroic at all, didn't really succeed to do much greatness, but he survives it. He gets drunk one night on a roof and he falls off, breaks his neck, dies. And here's Odysseus seeing him in Hades going, what the heck? How'd you get here?
That's right.
Unfortunate Elpenor. But here you have fortunate, lucky Eutychus, and he gets resurrected. So there is so much. I would say that this is a lot more fun than trying to go to Acts and go, this is what literally happened and it had to happen this way. It's like, dude, do you not see how awesome this clever creativity is? And that's the difference between what I think you're doing versus what they're trying to do in the historical reportage model. So
I want to respond just very briefly to that. One of the comments from MythVision earlier on was by a woman, I forget her name, but she said something that was so important to me, and I want to highlight it. Many times when people use analogies from the Greco-Roman world, they do so in an unfriendly way to Christian texts, to say, look, this is just a mythology. You can get rid of mythicists tend to do that all the time. You don't have to take early Christianity seriously and so on. I take it very seriously. And what she said is what I like about MacDonald's work is he replaces one forced form of meaning and gives it another form of meaning, which is actually more compelling. So which is more compelling? To say that Paul had the powers actually to raise people from the dead, or to say that when you're in the presence of an apostle, life takes over and not death. So I'm sympathetic to this text. I think it's the way the early Christian church is trying to talk about the hope that comes in their experience. So I'm not saying it's mythological, but it's positive mythology. And that's a part that I don't think apologists get, that you can have mythologies and commensurabilities that are positive, that give new positive meanings to these things.